to all of our retirees. You will be missed. And at this point, I would like to invite Mrs. Birdman up to the microphone. Mrs. Birdman, this is your moment. Sorry. Sorry, we're doing a little bit of a add-in here due to for some unforeseen circumstances. There was a little bit of delay, so we would have had a blue card earlier, but we're happy to be able to fit it in. So, there should be a button.
Hello. Oh, okay. Thank you for letting us speak quickly. Recently we went to New York City for Mark to receive his National Gold Medal at the Scholastic Art Awards at Carnegie Hall. And so we had a fantastic time. It was very wonderful to be there and see Mark get recognized for his work. I'm so proud of all the work he's done all this year, and we wanted to give you a thank you. And Mark can tell you about it, and he has a few things to say as well.
So obviously I'd like to tell you guys thank you, obviously, for approving the trip. I had a great time. It was an awesome experience. The big thing that night was watching Tina Fey speak, and she had this excellent motivational speech that I couldn't dream of recreating. But it was really cool to be able to sit in a room with 800 of the other most talented artists from across the country, and it was really nice to be able to meet other like-minded people and be able to share stories about how we use art and how we create art, and it was just an amazing experience. And as Mrs. Bergman said, we'd like to present you with a picture from the top of Rockefeller Center that I took and edited on the train ride home.
Which I think actually is funny because Tina Fey was on 30 Rock and we took this at the top of the Rockefeller Center. So.
That's amazing. So Mark, you really captured Van's transportation. I need you to sometime come back and get all that. I can hang it on. Maybe a little taller. Okay. Let's just.
He's got a cold right now.
That is amazing.
This is painful very much. This is not
That really is. Thank you very much. You don't have
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks so much. And on behalf of the board, I'll simply say that we are always happy to be able to support, whether it's athletics, academics, the arts, whatever it is. So we're thrilled that you put yourself in a spot, and with the support of your teachers, of course, to be able to recognize like that. So congratulations to you. And if you haven't seen his photo that got recognized, which was called Game Face, it really is awesome, in addition to the one that we just got. But keep up the good work. With that, we will move into reports to the Board of Education. First thing we have is unfinished business, which is data discussion. I think at the last meeting it was forecast 5 was coming back. I don't even remember, was it during the summer at some point?
Yeah, to give us an update. They keep putting more into the dashboard and stuff in there.
Yep, and the other part of the data discussion, which was the outgoing goals on certain benchmarks, will be presented during the superintendent's report in a few minutes, so we'll get to that part. With that, we'll move into board reports. I'll open it up to Mrs. Wood in just a second, but first, some recognition for Mrs. Wood from the New York State School Board Association. So when you, it is a check for $1 million, but which, funny enough, pays for one in-person training at the board event. When you become a board member, you're required to take certain training, finance and legal and other things, but then there are a slew of other things, and we joke about it because let's face it, none of us went for this position or took this role to get pieces of paper recognition. But it really is nice to be recognized for the time you invest. If I'm not mistaken, this is the end of 19 years for Mrs. Wood as a school board member. And so the New York State School Board Association, you gain points for training that you do, for in-service trainings, for going to the conventions, which are, a slew of different training topics throughout the day. So all that to say, over the years, Mrs. Wood has accumulated 250 points, which is the third of 4 levels, and is considered the Board Mastery Award. You get this amazing, somewhat pleather portfolio. You do get, which is actually a savings to the district, which is really nice, 1 in-person free training from NISBA, and a fantastic certificate from the School Board Association. So congratulations, Board. With that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Wood and see if she has anything for open forum.
Let's see. On Flag Day, I went to Brewerton Elementary to see their presentations. And my grandson is in Sue Spee's class. She's just retiring, so I took cookies in, and she wanted me to stay for the day as the crack in the whip, but, but the kids were great. They had a great time. And Kristen's son is in her classroom too. So it was a very nice presentation. Kids did a great job. And also we went to the transportation banquet on Friday night, and that's always a fun time. And food was great, a lot of good friends, and it was just a great time.
Awesome. Thank you. Open it up to the rest of the board. Let's start with our, I don't know what you call them, our retirees from the school board. Mr. Bedworth, last chance for open forum. Anything for you?
Nope.
Good. Mr. Buddy?
I'll just say that I'm not completely done with my community service. I'm going to actually go around Central Square, and all those white posts that are on the corners that are all tilted over from trailers hitting them, I'm going to straighten those out and paint them. And I said it publicly, so now you got to hold me to it, right?
Thank you, Mr. Buddy. And I'll take this opportunity, even though we haven't officially done it yet, but on our agenda tonight is the approval of a donation. And Phil, through his work with his company, which is solely escaping me right now. Excellent. God, I think it's basically you do some volunteer hours, and so the company then makes a donation. So the company is making a nice donation to Central Square on behalf of the work that Mr. Buddy did. So thank you for that. Any other board members with topics for tonight? Mrs. Nickerson has to be excused from the meeting to go be a mom. 7th grade concert is starting over. Sorry, 6th grade, yes. Concert is starting in the auditorium. And so, thanks for being here.
Sure. Excuses.
All right. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Colabufo, who has the superintendent's report.
Well, my superintendent report is going to consist of 2 things. One, you see it right there on the board. Each board member has this in front of you. I'll speak about that in a second. The other thing, I just again want to give a huge shout out to everybody from transportation, to the principals, to the teachers, to the support staff that made the graduation walk possible today. It was really cool to see the kids go to the buses, to go to their different elementary buildings, and their excitement. And just listening to the seniors' conversations, they were boarding the buses, that they were so excited to go, to their elementary school. So I thought that was great. Teachers emailed me today saying how great it was to see the students that they had when they were younger walk through the hallways, and how inspirational it was for the kids to see that. I thought that was wonderful. I guess I can do this from right here. I mean, it's right there. So basically, last board meeting I said that I was going to have a 1-page document to give you a visual about the indicators and our 3-year goals, and have elementary on there as well as middle school and high school. So we broke them down into 3 categories, as you see: attendance, academics, and graduation rate. And we'll scroll up when we get there. The board members have the full sheet in front of them. But the really awesome thing is, at the last district-wide strategic planning committee, the group itself had come up with the very similar indicators that we need to look at as we're building our strategic plan out. Obviously, attendance is important. If you're not here and you're not present, you can't be successful. And then obviously, academics, but we also discussed things that were discussed at the last board meeting that, the 3 through 8 testing, although it is, an indicator, it's only one indicator. So we are at the elementary buildings, again, we are looking at DIBELS, we're looking at STAR, that is one right there that we will be looking at though, as the state is continuously saying we need to get to that 95% participation. And then graduation rate. And so what we did was all the way down through, you have IEP, students with an IEP, you have general ed students, that's a student without an IEP, and then you have all together, what number that comes out. So basically we looked at this and we looked at our first year goal, second year, or third year goal. For some of the third year goal, it was gaining consistency. And what we did is we looked at not only districts in our county, we looked at districts in Onondaga County and where they were at. And we wanted to make goals that were definitely, that we felt if we worked really hard were attainable, but we didn't want to make it where it was so easy. We wanted to be able to, increase the rigor, as that is something that we're constantly working on. So this is a document, more of a document that the board members, I want you to just kind of look at it and digest it. I do have the little codes with the asterisks, and at the bottom it says, their explanation. But I do believe we can get there. I think that our graduation rate, as you can look at this, one of the things that jumps right out is the drop-off of IEP students showing success at graduation and at the Regents exams. And that is something that we are going to be looking at. So we're going to look at this document. The principals will all have this. And when they're building their school action plans, this is what they're going to have to look at to say, okay, if we're really going to get that success, and let's say it's an elementary principal, they're going to look at this and say, okay, this is where we're at. These are things now that we need to be able to do this. So what is our current process and procedure in notifying parents? What is that number? And consistently among all of our elementary buildings, we need to look at what that number is. So it's not going to be just, 8 absences will generate that letter. So what is the protocol that we can build in place to contact those parents, to have the parent meetings, to bring them in, and not in a negative way, but to offer those parents, what are those things that we can do to better support the parents at home to get their kids to come to school? I think we do a pretty good job doing that, but this is going to be a good systemic approach across the district. Same thing with our academics. The one thing with the 3 through 8 testing is we are going to be doing apples to apples. So this is going to, it's going to be a little bit of work, but we're going to be able to do it. So we're going to look at a student that, let's say, got a 2 in 3rd grade. We're going to look at that same student when he takes it in 4th grade to see if that student has shown improvement. So even though it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4, they actually have an actual number. It could be like 516. So we want to look at that, and we realize even though they're different tests, because it's the next year, but by tracking that student, we want to see growth being made. So that is something that we're focused on. Then obviously, our graduation rate, we want to constantly improve. You may have just seen it in the paper. They did one of those polls, and out of, I think, 56 schools, we were ranked 19 for our high schools. And when I say there were a lot more than 56 schools, but they just showcased 56 schools, and they had probably more ranked as 19, and that was the readiness, college readiness criteria that goes in that, and as well as graduation rate. So that's great. We want to move to the top of that list. So we are going to be looking at these categories, but we're going to be looking at a lot more. Forecast 5 keeps adding to the dashboard, and it's really going to be able to help us build the profile of a successful student. I want to be able to have our elementary principals have meetings with parents saying, if your child participates in music, here's the average GPA of a student at the high school that is involved in music. Here's the average GPA of a student that's involved in a sport. Here's the average GPA of a student involved in music and sport. Here's a student GPA or average in attendance that's in DECA. We want to be able to provide these opportunities and this data for parents is another motivating factor to get students engaged and involved just by showing them this data. So we're really excited about that.
Tom, just a question for the academics category.
Yep.
That's how many students got a 3 or a 4, right? That's not how many students took the test?
Correct.
Is there any way that we can know how many students took the test? Because I know in prior years we've had issues with opt-outs and things like that, so I think that, you know what I mean? It would
Yeah.
be interesting to see how those numbers have changed as well.
Great
They're
feedback.
obviously going up a lot, but it could be, you know, there could be a lot of more students taking the test, and I just wondered if we could somehow reflect it.
That's a great point. What we can also put on there, I know Andy had asked me when we build the dashboards to put the participation on there, with the 3-2-A testing, which would be also another thing, and we have to do it anyway, because we're kind of on a list of below a certain amount of participation, because it's not 95, but it has to show growth. So we have that information, so we can definitely add that in there for each of the grade levels, the total number of students that actually took the test. Good point.
So Tom, you talked about if a child in third grade isn't reading at a third grade level, right? And if you mix poverty into it, that their success rate goes down quite a bit. How are we going to? That really struck me as really a foundational key indicator as far as how well kids are going to do. How are we going to be able to track that?
Yep. So
K through 3, right? So at the graduation of third grade.
Yep.
How many kids are reading at a third grade level?
So that is what we were talking about when we were talking about STAR, and we were talking about Dibbles. Erin had spent some time talking about that when she was talking about her like Scarborough, did I say it right? Scarborough's rope, and the whole breakdown of the reading. But this is just one indicator. It used to be back in the day when everybody took the state assessments, that if they got a 1 or 2, it was mandated. That was a way to be able to say, okay, this is the student who struggles. They need to have literacy. They need to be get reading AIS. This is just one indicator right now, but they have teams that go in each of the buildings, and they look at a number of different indicators that will then determine if the student needs to, that they're reading below grade level. What are those interventions put in place, and then we track those interventions. Erin, if you want to jump in and add to that, feel free.
So, broken. This is broken.
No, you. Push. Push your finger down.
So that's part of where you received the data last year that we had 60% of our students reading at grade level. That's what we're tracking. So we will look at the DIBELS component to it, but we also have more diagnostic stuff right now. And actually, with all of the kids getting tested district-wide, we're in the process of compiling all that information district-wide, so that we can see what gaps the kids are missing. And I just saw one grade level today, and it's very interesting, the patterns that we're seeing, so that we can then, next year when school starts, groups are going to be formed based on data right now, and then they'll be able to implement quick interventions for those kids to close that gap so that they can continue to move forward. But we're going to have that information. We'll have it at the end of this year. We'll have it at the end of next year. So that's information that we're getting to see, you know, are our students responding to the current initiatives that we're putting in place.
And so to your point, Mr. Patch, so we have it with 60% of our kids are reading at grade level. That's something that I do believe, and we'll add that on there as well. So it's not just going to be a state assessment, but I'll add that to the document as well. That'll track third grade to be able to say, because that's the research that does say that if they're not reading at grade level by the end of third grade, they're 4 times less likely to graduate. So the big test, Erin, when do you think we'll get that? That was for last year's students. When do you think we'll get it for this year's students?
they're still finishing up testing because they're doing more diagnostic this year. So they're not just doing DIBELS, but they're also redoing the QPS in the past, the phonological awareness piece on all the students, so that we really get a good idea of where we need to start with our intervention. So I would probably say by next week. I can definitely have it by the July 1st board meeting.
Yeah, because to me, it's in the 60% is a good number because it's the start, right? So then we can see typical, because I always bring up the Red Hawks program, right? We made a presentation a year ago, was that at this particular level we were at, so we're at 60%. So what are we going to do? What's success? Is success 90%? Is it 60? Is it 65?
Well, right now what we're hearing is that the goal that we should set for students to be at grade level is right now 85%. So that's a big jump for us, being that we were 60%.
Right.
And the research that we have done and that we've learned about is that 60% of students will learn to read no matter what type of intervention or instruction you give them. So we're really looking at those, that 40%. So what can we do to hit those students, close those gaps, and then move them forward? So So every inch that we get closer to that 85% is a win.
Okay.
And I'll add that onto this chart.
Yeah, because I think it's just, to me, it's important, you know, and I mean, I always talk about this all the time, you know, data-driven decision-making. So, you know, if you're at 60, and then if you spend a year, right, adopt, you know, the current reading program, we have everybody within the county-wide, and you see a jump, right, then you can attribute it to what you're doing. If the following year it's at 55, then obviously something's not really working. And if you track it and look at it, then you can make adaptations and really do things. So I think to me it's really important to do going forward.
Yeah,
It's key. I think it's key.
Yeah, and you have to look at the data. I mean, if you look at this sheet, you look at Common Core eligible regions, what happened, and these are the questions I need answers on. What happened, and it could be the number of students, but what happened from 2016-17 to 17-18, where the IEP students went from 43% passing to 28% passing. Non-IEP students went from 9% passing to 81% passing. That's a drop. And so what was going on at those times? What happened?
Yeah, and it's not. And to me, it's not about being critical. It's about process improvement, right? And you know, take a look at it. Is it an anomaly? Is it, you know, a teacher being out within the core group on maternity leave or whatever? I mean, there could be whatever the reason is. But if you don't have it to drive it and to dig into it, and then to understand that everything, right? Because you know, improvement comes. If you want an improvement, you've got to measure it, and it's quality improvement. So I think it's important.
Are we saying that the metric for students reading at grade level, third grade, is DIBELS?
That's our first, that's like when you go to the doctor and you get that, you know, that temperature check. So if your temperature's fine, we don't necessarily need to go deeper, because if you're within the green band, because DIBELS norms are set nationwide, so if you're within that green band, you have the skill sets solid to perform at that grade level. So if your temperature isn't great and you're yellow or red, that's where the diagnostic stuff is coming into play. We are doing diagnostic stuff right now on every student, because even if students are green, they could be missing a single vowel team or something like that that might impact them as they get into 6th grade, 7th grade, when you get into multisyllabic words. And we want to get an idea of where are the kids at different grade levels, so we can kind of set our own norms so that when we're looking at AIS, we know kind of what the range is of kids that need that extra support versus in the classroom.
Okay, so in the past, historically, how would we determine who's on grade level?
DIBELS.
Star?
Yep, and we've been 60%, the data that I gave you last year was the last 2 years. If you remember, a few years ago, we used DIBELS as the APPR, so we couldn't utilize it those 2 years because they were different probes. So the data that we have is the DIBELS piece, so that's the one aspect that has been the constant, and the correlation between how students perform on DIBELS and their performance on state assessments is very strong.
And that's the nationwide accepted level for how you assess grade level?
Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's, within Oswego County, because these are the conversations that we're having, many schools are using DIBELS, and the other tool that teachers or the districts are using is Ames Web Plus. So those are the two. They have all the same probes, their fluency, first sound, nonsense word fluency, all the same types of probes. So those are the two assessments that the entire county is using.
Okay.
So in addition to all the other comments, and obviously not tonight, but just looking at the attendance, like the outlier to me seems to be, unless you guys can know the obvious answer, is the clear drop off in attendance of IEP in high school versus all the others. So down the road, can we just have fill us in on why that is, like what the situation is, and then how we improve that? Because, you know, again, I'm not at all questioning the goals that you set. It's just unless there's something that would prevent us, it seems like we ought to be shooting to improve that IEP 9 through 12 attendance rate more than we are. Because like, if you take the non-IEP, over the course of 3 years, we're looking to improve that by 347 basis points, but that's a larger percentage than we would look at from IEP, because that's going up less than 300 basis points. So it's just interested in more detail there. Nothing more behind it, just interested in it. But I think these are good, and then, you know, again, I love the data part of this because it begins to tell a much more complete story. So down the road, once we have a good handle on these and what impacts them, then we can start to say, all right, what's the leading indicator? So for everything up there, there's something that happens before it that can give us an early clue, and then a lagging indicator that if we change it now, down the road, we're going to see an improvement in this other metric. And then that really helps long-term the board, you know, determine things like capital projects and what we do and don't do in budget proposals, all that.
And again, I want to mention something else because we have IEP on here throughout. So in talking with Michelle Alanya, we had the opportunity to meet with all of the school psychologists, and I got to share an experience of myself because I went to my son's CSE meeting as he's going into kindergarten, and there was some confusion about it. My wife was a little confused, and for someone that's never been part of that, it can be, you know, very teary, emotional situation. So what we're going to do to improve communication, because that's always our goal, is continuous improvement, there's going to be a post-CSE parent feedback form that they'll be handed. They go home, they do it, and then Michelle Alanya will get those results. And basically it's going to say, are you comfortable with the terminology and the services that your child is getting? Do you have any further concerns? Is there anything else that we need to be able to further answer? Because when you're sitting in that situation, you hear about 65% of it because it's your kid and it's an emotional experience. This is going to be able to provide them an opportunity to be able to go home, calm down, and then ask those questions that they're still concerned about. Because at the end of the day, we don't want anybody like clueless when it's their own child. And we're doing the same thing with 504. So I think that too will help with these numbers. And I think in not only academic, but attendance. Because if the parents feel more comfortable with it, I think the students will as well.
I'm going to ask a question, and you can tell me if I'm off base here. I'm wondering where home life, where student, that, you know, with the poor kids, with the terrible family lives that some of these kids have, how is that playing into this?
So we have Jenny Bianco, who does go down to the elementary, so that's great. Mental health, we've had some serious issues at our elementary buildings as well. Right. We're also going to have the elementary counselor and then another elementary counselor the following year. We have the social worker down there as well. I give Mrs. Moskal a big shout out for the connection she makes with students. But to your point, we have a growing number of parents that just don't have the resources to be able to do that. So it's linking them. Again, I want to give a shout out, and there are board members that sit on that committee. But when we had, I want to say like 65 different agencies came in and we had a fair. And somebody on the cabinet told me that a parent reached out to them. Obviously, I won't say who, but they really made some connections that night and they stayed with that, which is huge. So it's going to take an effort. It's always going to be an effort to be able to connect with those parents, especially the parents that had a bad taste in their mouth when they were students here, and now they have children struggling as well. So, good question. We are continuously looking for it.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
It'd be nice to, excuse me, it'd be nice to have some sort of measurable metric for those kinds of situations.
Right.
Yeah, and again, to that point, to me anyway, that's one of those things that happens on the road, because while we certainly can have an impact on the child here, we can't do home life, right? I mean, but it's an indicator of all the other things we do. So definitely great. Any other comments on this portion? And again, this portion, I would think, is probably something that, with the new website revamp, this is probably going to be front and center where, you know, for the next 3 years, we're going to be reporting how we do to this. And one of those things where even if we miss the target, we've set a target to shoot for, and that's a great step forward. All right, thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Colarupo. With that, we'll move into the action items. Can I get a motion to accept item F1, approval of the resolution for cooperative purchasing school year? Mr. Buddy, second. Mrs. Wood, any discussion on F1? All those in favor? Thank you. I get a motion for item F2, approval of the resolution for the food and cafeteria supplies bid. Mr. Buddy, second by Mrs. Fishman. Any discussion on F2? All those in favor? Thank you. And I'll make a motion for item F3, approval of the resolution for the generic school year. Can I get a second? Mr. Buddy with the second. Any discussion on F3? All those in favor? Can I get a motion for item F4, approval of an overnight student trip?
I'll make it.
Mr. Roy, second. Mr. Buddy, and we'll open up for discussion. Mr. Haldeman, I think we're going to invite you up to the microphone at this point.
Okay.
This is the overnight student trip because I'm pretty sure I know Mrs. Wood has some questions, and rather than make you come up here later, Mrs. Wood, would you like to open up the discussion?
I'm hearing, I had phone calls from a few parents, Ron, that have concerns about this Dayton trip being a financial burden on their families and a financial burden on the Booster Club. I was told that at a booster meeting, it was told that this particular trip would be done every 2 years, and it's been done if and when we approve this overnight trip. For next spring, this will be the 4th year that they've gone.
Right.
And I don't know how the boosters and how these families, with the contracts that the kids are made to, the families are supposed to sign, from November till March, they are supposed to produce a $150 payment every 2 weeks. And had that come out of their family budget, to me, that is quite an exorbitant trip for 18 kids. I can see dangling a carrot and saying we can do this every couple years or every 3 years, but to me, I just think it's an awful lot of money for that amount. And I had questions about that because these same kids have to do field band and they have to come up with $425 for field band. Then they have to turn around and come up with like how many thousand of dollars to come up, either fundraise or pay. And you know, then they have to pay for 2 WGIs, so it's just a big financial, and I don't think it's wrong to say no every couple years. And that's what I want to say.
Okay, and you want? Okay, well, first of all, I'll say I just want to thank you for, and this is not in any way saying that you're not supporting, because you,
right.
You do. And I just want to thank you for your support. So this program development is a interesting thing, and when you catch a wave where the program is excelling, it's kind of hard to stop. Initially, I know that the program itself, especially going to WGI, it was discussed not to necessarily go every year. You're right, okay? And what we found as we continue to talk to people, the Central Square just wasn't on the map. And if I could say that as far as a regional and on a national level. So what I'm saying by that is when they went to the first one, no one knew Central Square. No one knew who they were. And so the next year they did, I think they added 1 more regional, maybe 2 more regionals. In order to achieve at that level, you kind of have to, people have to know who you are, especially the judges.
I understand that because I had 2 daughters in the program.
Absolutely. And there's no way around it other than, yes, it does cost, it is costly. The parents are very aggressive as far as fundraising. And I know that it was never said that we wouldn't go in other words, we said, yeah, we talked about going every other year, but it wasn't ever said that that's what we're going to do necessarily. And then when the next year came and the kids really were excited and they wanted to go, we said, okay, well, we'll go. And it's sort of been that every year. And, you know, unfortunately, it is costly, but in order to rise to the top of a competitive environment, it's hard not to keep that going.
But does that have to be, they came in 7th in the world last year, do they have to do that every year? I mean, do they have to, and it's my understanding that there are 6 kids that are graduating from the program, so now you're down to, say, 18 kids, so now you're down to 12 kids, so now you've got to replace 6 new kids into
Right.
the program. So,
Right.
I guess, I don't know,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but we can't also, I can't guess where, you know, those 6 kids that are coming up, they're coming up through a JV program
Right.
that just placed second in that mid-York championships, and so they're achieving. So it's a fine line, and I'm sympathetic, but it's a fine line because you want to, and I think the district wants to too, you want to keep excelling in academics and you know, in the arts as well as in athletics. And but how do you do that sometimes without it costing and without that sacrifice? It's a sacrifice. There's no two ways about it. But again, it's like hard to know, say, okay, no, this group is not going to go this year, even though they want to go, they want to achieve.
let me go back to that. The field band used to go to Disney every 4 years.
Right.
And when it came time, and which I don't care, but let me just tell you, when it came time for my daughter to go to Florida, they said, nope, we're not going.
Right. That was a very difficult time.
Well,
Yeah.
here we are, same
Yeah.
thing.
It's a Disney, although I will say a Disney trip is a lot different than a WGI
Well,
event. Because I know a Disney trip right
They
now
didn't have to come up
costs.
with, that kind of
Yeah,
money.
a Disney trip costs around $300 to $400 a person. So if you take a trip and let's say that realistically you're there for 4 to 5 days.
But we've gone on our
Yeah.
trip here for the Winter Guard. What is the total cost for that Dayton trip?
Well, it's.
For 18 people?
Yeah.
Or are you talking to the district?
No, I'm just
Talking
talking
about
in
per
general. Sponsoring the group, $15,780 for
Right.
18 people.
Right. So if you break it down, I mean, a Disney.
Plus, cost to the district, $7,750.
Which is,
And that's,
I'm just making sure, Ron, I don't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt you, making sure everyone has, Lori called me earlier on this, so I want to make sure I share the same information. That's not a true cost. You can see up at the top there, truck, 1,400 miles. So they're using an equipment truck. It's that per mileage rate is what we would charge an outside group. So it's just so that we're doing an apples to apples comparison.
Our green sheet
But
says
$400
cost,
is our.
but our green sheet says cost to the district, $7,750.
Right, I understand that's what it says, and that's because a result of that sheet. All I'm saying is that that's not necessarily an out-of-pocket expense. The out-of-pocket expense is the actual gas used and the actual cost of the driver for that equipment truck. So and again, I'm only bringing that up because I don't want to tell
Right.
Lori one thing on the phone and not maybe you guys do the same.
Well-
It seems as though there's a lot more to this story than what maybe a couple of us, I'll speak for myself, is aware of. So are we a little premature in having this conversation? Because if it's this contentious, maybe we need to discuss it a little bit more before we get to the point.
I'd like to table it until our new members come in July. That was my recommendation to Andy, and because Mr. Hoyt will be on, and so will our other.
But it sounds as though someone here's got a point of contention. I don't know why that is. I'm not being critical. I'm stating a fact. I'm stating a fact. Hang on a second, Lori.
Okay.
You seem to have an issue with this. I want to explore what that issue may be, to get a little bit smarter on the issue. If that's all right with everyone, unless you have to have a decision today on a trip that's going to be 8 months from now, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'll say
You're not buying
about
tickets today.
So the motion's made, so we'll be voting. If we want to vote it down and then they resubmit next week, that's fine. And Lori mentioned on the phone today taking off, and my view is Mr. Colabufo has this on the agenda, so I wasn't going to remove it. If we don't vote it through, it comes back next week. I was simply being respectful of the fact we can absolutely bring back. My view is there's nothing in here for me that concerns me from a district perspective. booster, parental fundraising, all
Well,
that.
you're looking at the wrong guy.
No, no, no.
You're looking at the wrong guy.
I'm saying that for everyone, including Mr. Haldeman and everyone sitting there. All of those other things, I don't view as purview of the board. For me, the decision is, we have a signature of the staff member, Mr. Haldeman's clearly, I think, in support of the trip. The principal, the transportation supervisor, the business official, and the superintendent have all signed off. I don't see anything that would keep me from voting no. That's just my view. So, we have to vote on it tonight, but it can go.
Keep you from voting no?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That would keep me from voting no. Correct. I don't see anything that is a concern to me. If you do, that's fine. I would absolutely vote yes or no as you need to, and then if it doesn't pass, it goes to the new board. I'm not a believer in delaying things for a new board that is the right of the current board. So for instance, and I'm just going to bring up, there's a different school district that on their agenda this week will be offering some sweet deals and contracts before the new board takes place. That I think is dishonest and disingenuous to the voters. This I think came before the board by administration. I don't think it's wrong for us to vote on it, but
I have no problem voting on it. It's just a matter that it seems as though there's a lot of conversation about this. And if that's going to be a problem, then we'll readdress it.
My only concern is when I have 4 parents talk to me and bring this to my attention, I, as a board member, need to bring it to the board and to the community. So, I have no problem with these kids going to Dayton. I think they need to wait a year. I'd like to see them take a year off so the boosters can recoup some funds and the parents can get a little bit of a break. So I will vote no if the trip is going to happen next spring. And on that basis, that is why I'm voting. And I want that in the minutes.
If I can just ask a question, so it sounds like there's some families that are concerned about being able to afford the trip. I have not been approached by any, but to the extent that happens, what happens? Are those kids not allowed to go and you take 4 more?
No, the kids are not denied the trip. No, that's.
So
never
what
been
happens?
Well, I mean, we fundraise, it's all for one and one for all when it comes down to it. But we do try to have individual accounts and that the parents pay into or fundraise too. But if there's hardship cases, we do not deny kids to go on the trip, you know, in any way based on that. We never have, whether it's field band or winter guard or drumline. We've never denied students.
I can't speak for other years.
And we would not do that. And we would not do that.
Right. I know this year for certain, there was at least one student that was not able to, for whatever circumstances, to fundraise or put anything towards it. They went, it was covered, you know.
So somebody covers it, it's not just...
As long as the parents and or individual are willing to go and ask for the help. Somebody's not going to come and give it to them. They need to just go and ask for the help and give the reasons why. You know, I mean, which I don't think is outrageous to ask of somebody. If you're asking for somebody to cover your costs or whatever, come and ask for it. You know, there's boosters will help. There's a lot of help that's out there.
Any other questions before we vote? All right. Thank you, Mr. Haldeman, for being
Thank
here
you,
and for your
Ron.
input. All right, with that, all those in favor of item F4, approval of the overnight student trip? And those opposed? Those abstaining? 1. Motion passes 5-1-1.
Pearl, please make sure that my comments are in there. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to accept item G in its entirety? Motion by Mr. Buddy. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Loy. Any discussion? I will simply once again thank Mr. Buddy and Exelon for their very nice donation to Central Square. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. And with that, I'm going to make a motion that the Central Square School District Board of Education hereby move into executive session to discuss matters leading to the possible termination of a particular employee with action to follow. Can I get a second on that motion? Mr. Loyer. Discussion is that we will do our second executive session afterwards for Mr. Colobo's final year appraisal. We have a couple of employees that have been waiting patiently. I didn't want to make them wait even longer.
Final year? Tell me that when we get in the room.
Year-end appraisal? Oh, year-end, sorry. Final year, year-end. So, with that, we will, did we already vote on
I
this?
think you just caught about half the room off guard. You're all.
Yeah, not final year, year-end appraisal. All those in favor of executive session? Thank you.
Unfortunately.